Happy Hollow Weekend and welcome to GM Tips. This is GM Rick and many GMs in the background. Sorry I had to restart this at least once because we have been up since 5:30 and we're having a little emotional morning. So if you hear tears in the background, or crocodile tears as I call them, that's because we're having a hard weekend. But no, actually we're not. We're having a great weekend. It's just every once in a while when you're in the mind of a 5-year-old or 5.5-year-old and you're up early, things get a little frustrating, I think. Can't tell for sure. Had three of them. This is my third, but your guess is as good as mine. So, welcome to GM Tips. I hope you're having a great Halloween weekend. I hope you're having some fun celebrating and dressing up for it, going out with your kids, if you have kids, or if you're a big kid yourself, going out and having a good time. The great part is it's just a fun type of weekend. And I don't let it, being a little bit religious myself, I don't let it bother me. It's a weekend of celebrating and having fun. And it's a holiday just like any other one to me, but it's a lot of fun. So in the vein of that weekend, we're going to hit the GM tips of all GM tips that's fun to do, and that is centering the campaign around a central villain or NPC of note. And there's a lot of these different types and genres, and we're going to take a look at a variety of them. And mind you, some will be useful for a Mutants and Mastermind campaign. Some will be useful for an Open Legend campaign or a Cipher system or a Savage Worlds or a Numenera. Others will be useful for Firefly or Harry Dresden for the Dresden Files. Others will be useful for other types of campaigns like Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons. I do a lot of these GM tips a little bit neutral so that you can use these regardless of the genre. And that's what we're going to look at today. And the first of my many NPC or villain types, and I'm going to focus more on the villain. You can make them a good guy if you want, because there's an opposite of this that you can do the same thing for. This one here is going to be the Brainiac or the Mastermind. Now, the Mastermind is that. They're a master of plotting. They're a Machiavellian in their background. And you really could call them the Machiavellian type of villain. They are constantly looking at schemes, lies, twists, plots to make their plans come together and come to fruition. They are not an in-your-face villain, though there is a time that they will present themselves from behind the curtains, and they will lay out to the players just how awesome they really are. And I love these types because they're not a direct conflict type. They don't run up into your face and just try to punch your lights out or attack you with a sword or an axe or just cut you to little pieces. They are pulling the strings behind the scenes with their plots and their various relationships that they've built. And so the Machiavellian type is a very interesting type. They are constantly rewriting their plans to make them succeed, the ultimate plan succeed. And what they care about is their ultimate goal, their ultimate means to an end. And they will go there and use any means necessary within their power to get there. Now, you can do different spins and types of these. Some can be more just like the criminal mastermind that's running an organization. Others can be just this loner, kind of like, you remember, what was it, Unbreakable, or the one with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, where he ran the comic store in a wheelchair, and he was the real villain, and Bruce Willis was the good guy. He was the strong guy who couldn't be, hurt for long periods of time. And so I think it was Unbreakable. Yeah, it was Unbreakable. And the great part about it is you just didn't know it was Samuel L. Jackson till towards the end. You kind of got that vibe. But in the beginning, he was helping the hero. He was actually there doing things to make the hero a little bit clearer on what was going on. And the reason why is because he felt without the hero, his plans couldn't succeed. That's how these type of Machiavellian villains work. And they're more the hidden type, the hidden Remember the Wizard of Oz, where Oz was behind the screen and you could hear his voice, but you didn't know who the wizard was? Kind of that type. Then there's the other type that are the technos that will build their technology and use their brain to create things. So a Modoc, a Lady Hydra, those types. They are much more a builder of a technological empire, or it could be of a inventive empire. It could be doing steampunk type of things. So the steamwork creatures. Deadlands has a guy like that that does for Smith and Roebucks, that builds these robots and these steam power things, and they are the real crux behind that empire. But he's got evil machinations going on with what he's trying to do with them, but no one knows that, and so it's kind of cool. Or there's the type that can build golems and automations and automatons. Or there's like Pathfinder, the Ruin Lords, like Karzog and some of the others who use their gifts of what their vice is to really raise their empire and their knowledge and power. So these are the ones that look for knowledge. They're looking for just their own little spin and twist on things to really turn things and make it their win. But again, they're not necessarily an in-your-face. They might use some spells, they might work with some things, but they're not an in-your-face type. Not until the very end when they're confronted with the situation, and then they might. So that's number one type of villain, the Machiavellian. They have him as a crime lord in villainous archetypes, which are in the page 90 of the GM's Guide of Pathfinder. They'll have them in a lot of places. The Mad Wizard or Mad Inventor. This is your Baron von Frankenstein, or your wizard that is coming up with new spells and things that they're spinning. Or they could be a Doctor Strange type that has taken a new spin on things. They could be someone who's looking for forbidden spells, so they could be a Cthulhu-esque type of a lord. These are another type of archvillain. So it is the intellector, but it's more towards spells and the mystical. So look at this type. This type uses spells and powers and bending of the energies of the universe to try to warp their situation, enhance themselves, build their reality. So they are definitely an interesting type. They're a tinkerer type. They could be, in modern day, they could be mixing magic with technology to make the two work. So you got a lot of different types. It could be a wizard. They could be an arcanist type. They can be an occultist. Excuse me, a little bit of sniffles. They can be a lot of other different things, but they use spells and spell energy and ley lines. So in a Harry Dresden file, these would be your evil wizards and necromancers and other types that are trying to really shape and warp the Wizards Council. They call them the Gray Wizard or the Dark Wizard Council. This would be part of the Dark Wizards. In the more fantasy setting, these guys could be your necromancers running an undead cult. They could be looking for destructive energies. They could be your conjurers or transmuters, or trying to transmute and flesh warp and do shaping. Again, the Ruin Lords kind of follow into that one. There's a lot of different types of ideas for this. So don't think that just because it's a spellcaster type, it has to be one or the other. There's a lot of ideas you can use on this. And like in the modern day era, so if you don't want to use magic, these are your mad scientists. They're the ones that are working with genetics and with maybe illnesses or viruses. You remember, oh gosh, what was the show on Sci-Fi? It wasn't The Strain, because The Strain's one of them, but this one was the one where they went up into the polar ice caps and they found out they were messing with genetics, and it was kind of a plague virus. Oh, and I can see it. It was a black viscous goo, and you guys will probably be shouting the name of the show right now, and I'm just blanking on it horribly. That's what happens when I get on a video. I know all these shows, and then they go away when I'm trying to do it on camera. But like that. There's somebody that is messing with the very fabrics of reality. So this is another type of villain. The evil priest. So this could be like a priest of Zon Kuthan, the the wizard that believed in, or the god that believes in darkness and cutting yourself and chains, and pain is pleasure. It could be somebody like Rovagug the Destroyer, who's just trying to destroy worlds. It could be like a worshiper of oh, what's the Bane? There we go. Out of Faerun. Sorry, I'm blanking. Or Cyric or Cyrus. What was it? Cyrus or yeah, it's Bane, and then Cyric. Cyric was the other one. It could be Iuz from Greyhawk. It could be the Cthulhu-esque gods and goddesses. It could be Pinhead. You remember from uh, Hellraiser, so they could be worshiping something like the Chitons in a modern day esque type of thing, and be bringing about a event horizon type of thing in the sci-fi. So they're working with the dark fabric deities and the ones that aren't so nice to really enslave the population and bring their religion to the height in the civilized world. These are a nasty kind of pervasive type because they can be secret cults or secret priesthoods, or they could be something like Rahaza-Doom, um, Raza-Doom, the one that remember James Earl Jones did in Conan, where he's in the prominence with Set and his worship. It could be something as prevalent or as non-prevalent. So these are an interesting type again because they often believe and are fanatical with what their beliefs are. And so they're often tougher to stop because they're so devoted to their cause, as are the people who are following them. And so it is very eerie. And this can become a very eerie type of group to deal with. So keep that. Then there's the evil overlord. This one could be an overlord like an alien race that comes in and takes over. It could be something like Loki, who takes over in the Avengers. It could be someone like uh, what's his name? Darkseid from the comics. It could be somebody like out of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Remember where they have the evil lord overlord there? There's a lot of different ones that could be done. It could be an evil anti-paladin. It could be an evil barbarian lord that's come in and is taking over an area. There's so much you can do with an evil overlord. There is not an easy thing that goes with this, or one type of personality. But the evil overlord believes in might, force, and they will take it by force of will, and they will rule it with an iron fist. So this is much more your confrontational type, like your juggernaut, that's coming in and he's going to just smash anything that stands in his or her way. So interesting things you can do with these overlords. There are so many different types that you can put, and they can fit every genre under the sun. So, if you go into a Deadlands, it could be an evil general of one of the two sides of the North or South who's broken off and is building his own private army or her private army to reign the world. Sorry, ladies, I should put more hers first. I know to do that. It's just like you will say, we've been raised on a very male pronunciation first, so I apologize for that. She can take these things and just rule this world with an iron might that like no other. And her forcefulness and her power is unbelievable. See, I can do this. I'm sorry. I feel bad. I mean, sometimes you guys probably hear the he's all the time and go, come on, she, Rick. Come on, she. So I have made the correction. I have put in the she. Or I can go gender neutral if we need to. They. So my crutch words. So you guys probably get sick of some of my crutch words too. And I used to not do this. When I was doing Toastmasters, there were no crutch words. But because I'm thinking through my thoughts as we go, that's when you'll hear me go to crutch words. And unfortunately, those become a real thing I like to hold on to. I try not to use ahs and ers, but so's, those take their spot, and it's sad. I've got to police myself better. Uh, Scheming nobles. I love those. They can be of any genre. They are the rich silver spoon person who believes it's all owed to them. They could be an heir to a financial empire or to a trade consortium. So, Pathfinder is an easy one. The Aspis Consortium and the nobility in there. The Through Night governments with the Cheliax Empire, the Chelaxian Empire. It could be some noble off of Faerun, so a Cormyrian noble or a noble of one of the many other realms that believes they have the right. You remember with Cormyr, the younger daughter was the one that had the schemes going on for the purple dragons and their group. Boy, yeah, it brings back memories of what I can remember. So the scheming noble uses money, wealth, prominence, their organizations, their networks, and they believe they're right because rich is right. And those are the ones that everybody vilifies most rich people today and corporations under those type of umbrellas. It could be the Umbrella Corp. There you go, for the modern day. Umbrella Corp and their richness. It could be something like the what was it, Vanderbilts, or somebody like that that raised up an empire in the 1800s. There's so much you can do with them, and they do so much, and this becomes a Game of Thrones. So it's much more about discrediting, crediting, building popularity among the other minor nobility and ruling class. And it becomes a very much a verbal combat type of villain, where they will use wealth, influence, power before they use might. Yes, they use might, but might's a tool to an end. That's not what they like to do or prefer to do. They are the noble. They would rather believe that they are destined to rule. So another one. There are the elemental or the outer world type of creatures. So the elements, I know we talked a little bit about the planes of power. So I've read about those, and it's really neat. It could be remember Wishmaster. Could be a jinn or an Ifrit that believes that they should form the reality to the way of their people, and that humankind is but a plague upon the world, and they must expunge it. These can be interesting villains, and they can really lead because of the very nature of their primal power of the elements and what they can command, and the fact they can command reality fabric and wishes. They can become a very difficult villain to deal with, always altering a reality in a certain area and causing the heroes to really be chasing their tails to try to stop all these cataclysmic events. Lots you can do with that type of villain. The Undead Lord. So somebody who has gone past life and preserved their life. It could be somebody as simple as a brain in a automated shell. It could be somebody who has used a serum to prolong their life after death. It could be a vampire. It could be a lich. There's a lot you can do with these type of undead lords, and they really are long-term thinkers. They're not trying to change the world today. They're doing a little bit at a time. And they're okay with some setbacks. So they're a little more difficult to weed out or ferret out of the background because they're not so eager to expose themselves to the world. They like to play in the shadows. And they like to move things little by little. And it's okay if they get a setback because they're going to move another piece over here or create another one of their children over here to try to set the party into 6 different directions. But their main goal is to turn the world to the perfect order of death. And so, or undeath. And it's an interesting kind of character. And as I read The Carrying Crown and some of the things there, it gave me a little more deeper insight into the mind of an undead, because we think of an undead as just like any other villain. They're not. They are long lived thinkers. They will live hundreds of thousands of years in their mind. So a little setback here today does nothing to set back their overall plan. And they're in no rush to confront the heroes. They're in no rush to run up and meet the heroes and try to defeat them themselves. They'd rather send their minions in and create more minions because they're expendable. Their order will eventually rise because they can continue. In each death, they can bring back another undead life. So they're a longer thinker. And here's the challenge as a GM, because many of us, I think, don't understand the undead, and they try to play them in this, me smash Hulk manner. That's not an undead. None of these undead lords think like me Hulk, me smash. They're about they're like the spider behind the scene, almost like the Machiavellian, but they're longer lived. The Machiavellian has a finite amount of life if they're not an undead. These creatures don't. They can live as long as they're not discovered and they're not put to death permanently or raised back to life and then put to death. So these are a much more difficult villain, but they're a fun one to run. And especially as they establish their cults and their followings, they're much more difficult to root out and figure out, because by the time you figure out one of those is pulling the strings, it's almost too late. It's like they've led you down a rabbit hole. And so play them that way as a GM. Don't just run them out into the forefront. And that's with all your villains. Don't be so quick to sacrifice your villains. Keep them coming back. I really love that I had one of the people I talk with, Akeisha, who's on Twitter. She's been DMing, and she told me some of the ways she's doing things and how the villains don't always stay dead. And I love it because the way she's taking it and working with her party, I'm not going to give away anything in case you're one of those party members watching this. She's got some great layers upon layers of plans that are going on. And that's the way we should be as GMs. We have layer upon layer with our villains. Don't run your villain to the forefront to always be the sacrificial lamb. Now, of course, the tyrants or the brutes are going to be a little bit more that way. But have somebody behind them that maybe is even deeper at a deeper level, or an advisor to them who is more thoughtful. So you can have multiple villains. You can have the main villain and side villains under them. And if the main villain gets expunged, the side villains will take over. It's an organization. Most of them do. So keep that in mind. And when you run them, really give them some depth of personality. I know one of the things they do in the GM's guide is they let you see they have characteristics, goals, they have whole tables. I would suggest if you haven't gotten that, and they even have occupations and everything else, copy, if you can get the PDF of the GM's guide. Yes, it's Pathfinder. I'm not saying you have to use all the Pathfinder rules out of it. Get it, if nothing else, for pages 94 through 100 and the rewards and other things, because they have things that aren't necessarily specific just to a fantasy campaign. They're things that you can transform and use no matter what the genre. And I love good tables. I'm a believer in, as a GM, get your tables from multiple genres and systems. And I spoke with one friend of mine on Twitter who was saying, Rick, should I get the horror adventures? Because is it usable across the board? The answer, yes. So is the Ultimate Intrigue. Yes, you can use it, whether it's D&D, Numenera, whatever. You just have to adapt it to the system of roles and difficulties. Is all you have to do. But the ideas and what it will do for the creative juices is greatness. These two books really, and I'd even throw in the Occult Adventures. All three of them can go across genres. And they're great because they can be enhancing your game. So even in something like an Open Legend, which I love, which is coming out of its Kickstarter right now, you can use these type of rules in there. And you can open-end them like Open Legend does and make it a little easier to play. But it gives you more depth, and it gives you ideas, and it keeps it fresh as a GM. And really, it's not so much for your players as it is for you. It allows you to come up with the things and the challenges of your players. You can do different challenges. Why not put a DC on a verbal combat? Why not have a verbal jousting match where it's tit for tat and it's roll for roll? And you don't have to do roll for roll. It could just be idea for idea, and then you sit back as a GM and judge who won. Now you got to be pretty fair with it. Rolls are pretty simple because they're straightforward and straight cut, and no one can argue them. Where someone can argue, yeah, no, I won that over you, Mr. GM. And you may get into a little bit of a bump there. But as you can see with this, selecting the type of villain for your campaign and the type of NPCs that your characters are going to run into and whether they fall into the villain type or the hero type is really key to making the campaign a fun campaign. I truly believe that setting a central villain for me, whether it's a good guy or a bad guy in alignment, is critical. And my players love it because then they got something that they're pointed towards, like a guided missile. Overall, they can go all over the map on how they get to that villain, but that villain is the end goal. That's the end game right there, and they want that end game. Everything else around them is fluid and can move whatever direction, but that villain is constant, and that's the thing. So, like in one of the campaigns I'm running, the end game is freeing Baba Yaga. Giving away nothing. It's freeing Baba Yaga. But Baba Yaga is a villain. Yes, she is. but there's a bigger villain. So a villain has taken out a villain. So what do you do then? Do you take the lesser of the evils? Or then do you dispose of both evils? Or do you dispose of no evils? Big questions there. But I love that because it makes the players have to think. It makes them have to think about the end goal. And my players do. They get sidetracked sometimes, and I got to remind them of the end goal. And once they come back to that end goal, everything kind of comes back into focus. So at the end of the day, that villain can be that end goal. How they defeat him doesn't matter. It's just the ultimate demise of that villain, one way or the other, where they're thrown behind bars, where they're like curses, you foiled me again. It's that moment of win that draws the players in. And so you got to have a great villain for that. And you really have to play it up. Use the voice, use the thinking, get into character. I love to get into character and sit back and say, well, so I finally get to meet you. Huh. You're a little smaller than I thought. And yet you try to defeat me and you cannot. All your thoughts, all your different plans come to nothing. I have outsmarted you, I have outthought you, and I have outlasted you. You see how you get that? And even now as you're listening, you're going, ooh, Rick, I just want to, ooh. That's what you got to do. You have to become that thing that drives them crazy and play it up. Play it to the hilt. Make them love to hate your villain. That's the key. Because once you do, then no matter what you do, they are off after you and will continue to come and come and come until they get them. And that's a great campaign where they're really just drawn into that. Or maybe it's something as simple as, oh yes, the peasant rabble. Well, you think you're a noble now, do you, messing with noblemen's politics? I see I must put you into your place as a peasant, because you have mighty thoughts of a noble and you are nothing. See? Very different than the other one. But yet it still evokes that ooh urge that just grinds their axe. And I love that because you can see the looks in their faces. You can see them just seething after this baddie. And yet you just step out of the way so they can't touch you again. And they have to chase their tail to get to you. And it's a constant race to get the villain. But it's fun because they're all uniting together. No matter what their differences are as a party, once you give them that center thing they can focus on for the thing they have to overcome, oh, they love it. Then away we go. So really think about this. Think about your villains. What type of villain do you want to be? I've given you a couple types. They're much more than that. Those are just some of your main central types. There are side types that you can take off that. I suggest even writing a list of the villain personality types. What are the driving personality types? So the ones I mentioned and maybe other ones that you've seen, and lay them out. And then from there, begin to roll and predict and put together. And your villain can be a culmination of two types, to where it really frustrates the character because they think they got them figured out, and no, there's another personality in there. And it's great because then you have them guessing. And I love to do that as a GM. I love for the players to continue to guess how they're going to get there. How are they going to arrive? And then when they get there, it's like a relief. Oh, wow, finally. And then they want to do it all over again. Then it's like, okay, when's the next campaign? Because you've taken them to that peak. You're bringing them up that peak of the mountain. And then when they hit that spot that they can see the sun and the rainbow and the clouds, you're like, oh, and then they come down again. And then you got to do it all over again. But it's well worth it. And it's well worth the memories and the adventures that you put together. So again, don't skimp on your villain. Don't just throw one in and play them like an everyday villain. That's where we fail sometimes as GMs. Enjoy them, become them, use the voices and make it powerful. Again, thank you and have a great Halloween weekend.